Welcome back to another episode of the Executive Code Podcast. If you want to find out more information about ourselves, head over to paulwilliamdaves.com and you'll find a lot more resources, or you'll also find the link to be able to join our community. As always, I'm joined here with Nicole, and she's got another question for us to answer. So Nicole, what have you got for us this week?
Hi, Paul. So regardless of which stage of life you're in, I've realized that a lot of life is made up of waiting, whether it's for a coworker to respond so you can proceed with your work, or, for a global pandemic to be over so you can go out and do normal things again. How can we develop our patience in terms of, for example, being stuck in traffic or, when dealing with people, but also in waiting to see the results of our hard work towards long-term goals? Is there anything we can do to make periods of waiting easier or better?
Okay, so in my mind, when I'm reading the question, is that there's two strands here. There's the short term and there's long term. So let me tackle the short term side of things first. And what I mean by short term is whereby, as you mentioned, where you're waiting for a coworker to respond, or there's somebody there in a queue, or whatever it be. They're kind of short term things, and there's more long term, which, okay, we weren't expecting the pandemic to be as long as what it was, but there's other things where we're trying to achieve different things in life and we're not seeing the evidence showing up and so on. So let's just break it down between the short term and the long term. What you'll find in the short term side of things is that it's actually that impatience is actually feedback. Typically, that's feedback for stress. So what you want to look at is, okay, what's that feeling that's actually coming up? And is that feeling, if you were to identify that feeling and what that feeling is trying to tell you, would your answer be that you're stressed? And 9 times out of 10, it typically is a stressful situation, or not a stressful situation. It's that feeling that comes up in the sense of you're at this mode of being in a stressed state. And that can be going on for just a few moments, a few hours, or it can be going on for a few days, few weeks, for a few months, if I could get my words out. So what you want to look at is that inner feeling given stress? And 9 times out of 10, it typically is stress. So what is it then that you need to learn from that feeling that's actually coming up? Because again, feelings are feedback to ourselves. So the question you want to ask yourself then is, why are you feeling impatient? As opposed to enjoying the moment that you're actually in right now at the moment. So what you want to then do is observe the moment and experience the moment. Because what I said previously on previous episodes, and I say this all the time in relation to our overarching purpose in life, is to live life fully, to experience, to love, and to evolve. So to experience means you have to be in the moment in order to fully experience. But if you're stressed out, well, then you're not going to be able to experience because you're not being in that moment. So those feelings are to indicate to you that you're stressed out and you're not being in the moment. So what can you do to do it? Well, then you got to look at what are the activities that you can do in order to actually reduce your stress. And a very simple exercise is actually breathing, as in breathing differently and breathing deeper. And therefore now what you're doing is you're getting out of that stressful moment. But what you want to look at is what's actually causing the stress in your life. And then now what you want to do is start to eliminate that stress in your life. Now, I know that may sound an awful lot easier than that can be done, but actually it depends on what you want to prioritize in your life. Because as we know, the more stress that's in our life, well, then the more dis-ease that's caused within our body, which then leads to dis-ease and medical conditions and illness within our bodies. So what we want to look at is it depends on what you want to prioritize in your life. And therefore, if you're having a stressful situation and it's ongoing, well, then do you want to continue that way, or do you want to rectify the situation? The other thing is you want to ask yourself, does it really matter? So some of the moments that we come across where we get impatient or we get frustrated, we get annoyed with different people and different things, when you actually stand back and you're actually in that moment and asking yourself, does it actually really matter? And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. So it's just, in some respects, sometimes there are habits that we need to create in our life to actually be in moments as opposed to trying to race to the next moment. Because as you know, if anybody's familiar with spirituality or personal development and all the different books that have been written, a lot of it is actually, just being in the moment that we're currently in, because there's only this moment, and then there's the next moment, and then there's the next moment. But what people are trying to do is they try and race to the future moments as opposed to being in the moment in the first place. And again, when we get back to the overarching purpose in life, our overarching purpose is to be your genius you, and then also to live, to love, to experience, and to evolve. So you can't do any of those if you're not being in the particular moment in the first place. The other thing that I want to suggest is that when we're observing behavior in other people where we get stressed out about it, or we react to it, or we get, in this case, your example, Nicole, that we get impatient, what you want to look at is what's the traits in the other people that you're identifying that's causing you that negative reaction. And what will lead into, and what you got to understand is those traits in the other people that you're reacting to and you perceive as being negative, meaning because the person's going so slow, or they're not getting back to you, they're not responding, or whatever it be, there are traits in that other person that you're not recognizing within yourself. And you can't be your full self, and which also leads into self-worth. You cannot increase your self-worth if you haven't owned those traits within yourself. And I go through an exercise with people, and it becomes quite, at the start, it becomes quite controversial in the sense of, the natural reaction I get from people, they'll say is, I don't do those things. I always respond to people, or I always do the trait that they're complaining about, they'll always say, I don't do those. But then by the time you've completed the exercise, they realize and they recognize those traits within themselves, and they understand that they're neither negative nor positive. They're just traits. So what you want to look at is those things that people react to are actually feedback to ourselves as well, that there may be traits with other people that we're not recognized within ourselves. And again, look at it from the perspective, it all comes back down to context. And so what I mean by that is, so could you have a situation whereby, for example, you are in the coffee shop and you're in the queue and you're waiting to get your coffee because you're stressed out, you got to get to a meeting and time's of the essence, and there's people in front of you, and the person that happens to be at the till is an elderly person, and they're taking out their coins out of their purse in order to pay for the coffee, and you're there stressing yourself out in order to actually get to your meeting. So can that be a stressful situation? Yeah, it can be. However, you have a choice. And that choice in that moment is actually to just be in that moment. And when you're being in that moment, well, then now you can start to reduce your stress. You've got a choice. Now, the vast majority of people are going to listen to that, what I've just said, Nicole, and they're going to say, yeah, but I just want to get to my meeting and I'm kind of stressed out. I don't have time. And that's what they'll be going in their mind. But you do get to a point in your life whereby, yeah, okay, look at certain circumstances show up in your life, or different things cause you to look at life differently. It's at what point do you want those feathers, bricks, and trucks to show up in your life in order to actually, for you to make it as slightly different choices and actually be and enjoy life as opposed to trying to race through life. So that's in the short-term side of things. Let's move on to some of the long-term side of things. What you want to look at is, because we can get impatient with our long-term stuff because we're not observing what we have actually achieved. So what do I mean by that? There's a podcast episode that I recorded, which was Mind the Gap. And I actually entitled it Mind the Gap. And the reason for it is because when we're doing something and we're looking towards our goals and objectives and what we want to achieve out of life, what people naturally are drawn to is they look at what they haven't achieved as of yet, as opposed to looking back and seeing what they have actually achieved. And because they're looking at all the things that are on their to-do list and all the things that they have to get done in order to achieve their goals and objectives, they feel that they are not making sufficient progress, and therefore now they're getting more and more impatient, and that impatience is causing more stress and so on, as opposed to actually looking back and saying, what have they actually achieved? So that's one thing that you want to have in mind. The other thing is in relation to have a look at what your end goal is. So I talk a lot about purpose and what is that you want to achieve, what's the difference you want to make, or what's the impact you're here to actually make. And that's the end goal. So when you have an eye on the end goal, and it's not about, again, I keep saying this, it's not about a race. It's actually enjoying the journey and enjoying the game of life in order to do your end goal or to achieve or to get to your end goal. Because you'll constantly be doing it. I can guarantee you'll constantly be doing it, as opposed to you'll never get to fulfill your complete purpose. You're here to constantly evolve, develop, and perfect your purpose. So when I know for people that don't understand in terms of they don't know what their life purpose is, they'll find that difficult to understand. And because they assume that once you got your purpose, well, then it's easy to achieve your purpose. No, it's not. What you want to do, it's very easy, from my perspective, it's very easy to identify an individual's purpose. And when you identify the purpose, you'll constantly work on your purpose because you're constantly evolving and developing your purpose. There's never a definite end point or an end line of when you're actually going to achieve your purpose itself. And as I said in previous episodes, it's having fun along the way. It's enjoying the game, because life is a game, life is a journey. You've got to enjoy it. When it comes to having patience about not seeing results, because again, I come across this quite a lot, whereby somebody's working on and they have something that they want to achieve or something that they want to manifest in their life, and they're now starting to get impatient about not seeing the results or not seeing it showing up. What I would say to you is have a listen to our previous episode, because we just recorded our last episode in relation to talking about persistence and talking about impatience. The two of them go hand in hand in relation to this. So, but fundamentally, again, and I'll explain this to when I work with clients, imagine for the moment that time doesn't exist, because time does not exist. It's a human construct. And when you understand that time doesn't exist, now you can start to let go. And the biggest and the strongest message that I keep giving to my clients, because it's the hardest thing to do, is to let go. But the more you actually learn to let go, now you've got no attachment to what it is that you want to achieve. And the moment you have no attachment to what it is that you want to achieve, that's when it starts to show up in your life. So when you are feeling impatient, it means you're attached to something. And that attachment means that you're going to get more impatient because it's not going to show up. So therefore, and I keep saying this message to everybody that I come across, you got to let go. And as soon as you actually let go and let things happen, it's not that you don't play a part in it. You're still taking action. You're absolutely still taking action, because it's a different type of action. It's not conscious action. It's inspired action. And when you're taking that inspired action, now you're making progress an awful lot more faster. So when it comes to patience or impatience, look at it from that perspective, because it's actually an indication that you're not letting go fully, completely, and therefore you're also attached.
What are some concrete steps or actions that we can take today to work on our patience or impatience, besides breathing that you mentioned earlier?
One of the biggest things I would give to clients is meditation. Without a shadow of a doubt, is meditation. So the form of meditation that I do is transcendental meditation. And most of my clients won't have done meditation prior to them becoming a client with me. I don't force my clients to do meditation, but it's invariably, it will actually show very early on in the conversations. And my advice to anybody is actually to do meditation. There's so many other benefits from meditation in terms of increasing creativity and your intuition and all the kinds of things, but actually it significantly reduces your stress levels. The other things is something else that you could do, which helps from this perspective, is to be out in nature. And I don't mean, there's one thing being out in nature, because for example, you could be playing a football match or playing tennis out in nature. That's out in nature, but it's not being in nature. Being in nature is whereby you're going for a walk and you're sensibly taking in all your different senses and all of what you are experiencing while out in nature. That's a very different thing. And it's quite similar to meditation, because now you're freeing your mind up of everything else and all those different stresses, and you're actually filling your mind up then with what it is, and that you're seeing, you're feeling, you're tasting, you're smelling while being in nature. So those two primary activities will be the most easy, practical things that I would advise clients.
These are good activities to do, even if you don't think you're impatient or,
Yeah.
they're good to incorporate into your regular schedule as well.
Yeah. Your daily routine. You just keep doing them. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Excellent. So we hope we've given you some advice there in relation to being impatient and to understand more about what's actually happening when you're having those feelings of being impatient, whether it be in the short term, whether it be in the long term, or whether it be in life in general. So when those things aren't showing up in your life whereby you're expecting to show up and you're getting impatient, listen back on the episode because there's a lot more information that's actually contained in that episode, more so than you realize. But until next time, I wish you every success.